Welcome to Working Smarter, Concise Compliance Conversations featuring Wendy Rubis, sponsored by VillageMD, primary care physicians. Practice medicine the way you've always wanted. Data, resources, and clinical decision support to care for your patients inside and outside the exam room.
Hi, welcome to Working Smarter. I'm Wendy Rubis, General Counsel of VillageMD, and it's a true pleasure to be joined by one of my favorite people today, Megan Harkins of the VillageMD Legal Department. Megan, welcome. How are you?
Doing great, Wendy. Thanks for having me back.
We're going to talk about one of your favorite subjects, which I know you became a true expert on during COVID. And we just wanted to do a check-in today. How's it going with telemedicine? We get a lot of questions about this. So we're going to talk to some folks in the field about how it's going. But in order to cue up the conversation, we're going to just set some basic groundwork and foundation about what we're talking about, just so people, our listeners, and we're all sort of on the same page about what the background is and what we're talking about. So, Megan, I think at this point, most people understand what telemedicine is. Do you agree?
I would. I think that it has come out enough during COVID-19 that folks are very familiar with it, whether they want it to be or not.
So, Megan, I think one of the things we've learned during COVID is there's a number of ways to provide telemedicine, including different types of tech, and as well as who's actually talking to who. Of course, the legal issues are varied depending on the type of mode, but what have you sort of seen during COVID that people are using, Megan?
I think it's been fantastic to see the level of access patients have been able to get to their providers during a really critical time, and seeing folks get creative for the benefit of the patient, although there is inherent suspicion with this being something new that was rapidly rolled out. But I think all things considered, patients have really benefited from this expanded access to care.
And one thing regulators and payers are suspicious of the audio only, of course, because they get worried that it's just too easy to abuse. But we know that many of our patients struggle with their using of their phone or a computer. And so, I think we would advocate that that can't be rolled out as an option in addition to just technical glitches and things. But the audio is really sort of, we would say, disfavored as easy to abuse. Would you agree with that?
100%. But to your point, there's a lot of other considerations, especially just the patient's financial situation, and where they're located, that I think it creates some additional considerations that
Right. And
regulators
my
should
mother
take.
is a listener of the podcast. So I don't want to tease my mother, but like the video thing for her is a big no. Okay. It's just
Sure,
audio only for her. Okay.
sure.
Just
You're going to
I'm
see a
letting you
close
know.
up of the forehead.
It's a big problem for the entire state when we have a video visit. Okay. Everybody's involved. Okay. Just kidding, mom. All right. So there's so much law here. Megan, we could go down a rabbit hole, which I know, frankly, you've had to with COVID. But why don't you just touch on the big ones? Just our goal is for our listeners at Village and elsewhere, just to keep in mind these are the big ones, guys. Okay, with telemedicine.
hmm Yeah, so state licensure, Wendy, is a big one, reimbursement and patient consent. We knew what this looked like pre-COVID. During COVID, it has taken on a new face, and we're all still anxiously awaiting to see what the long-term permanent rules are going to be.
So just a minute, let's focus on the state license because this is a major barrier. And of course, we know that our physicians are licensed in the state they live in or that they practice in, right? But this adds a new dimension to the licensure question, which is where is, there's sort of this esoteric question of where are you actually practicing? Where
Mhm.
you are or where the patient is. Is that right?
Mhm. Yep, 100%. States want to make sure that their patients are receiving the same standard of care as other patients who are receiving in-person visits. So definitely something to be mindful of when you're meeting with patients and confirming where exactly are they and are you ready to meet that state's licensure requirements.
So there's any number of variations and iterations of this that happen. What if a patient's on vacation? What if and we can't, there's no way we could possibly cover all of those. But the main thing to know is if you have questions about this, to reach out and get some advice to make sure that you're inside of this. Um, so the other, big barrier to proliferation of telemedicine, of course, is payment. And Medicare has been inching forward on this really since the entire time I've been practicing. But before COVID, the biggest requirements that were remain barriers was there was only certain areas, qualifying areas, mostly rural, but not all rural, where payment was permitted. And it's only for certain kinds of services. So not just any services. A lot of the services are hub and spoke, like, you know, expert stroke care from a stroke center to a rural hospital, for example, was covered, but not every kind of service was covered pre-COVID. Megan, is that right?
Yep, that's correct. And really, CMS was sort of pushed into embracing a more expansive view of telemedicine. Many of those changes are welcome, and we hope that they do end up staying because it does allow our providers to offer better care to patients and more timely.
One thing that's worth mentioning, we just wanted to touch on is the asynchronous care. And we've talked about this in podcasts before. People often ask us, like, what does that mean? And that's basically where the patient, there's many different iterations, but there's information that's sent to the physician electronically, and they look at it in some form later. It's not synchronous happening at the same time. And we've seen creep here in terms of more and more CPT codes permitted as part of, and we've talked about this as part of our physician fee schedule updates each year. But there is some ability to do asynchronous care. And the best example, look at the patient, send a picture of a rash, the physician looks at it and gets back to the patient.
So, Wendy, I know that we've talked about some of the key areas and considerations, but with anything in healthcare, there's additional considerations that need to be made when delivering this type of service: informed consent, privacy and security concerns, prescribing of controlled substances. So, if folks are looking into getting into this area or have questions, certainly reach out to legal counsel to get that
Yes.
advice.
We don't want to give you an impression that the hot ticket items we're covering is everything.
Right. This is not all inclusive. It's just sort of a high level overview of some of the things that keep us up at night when we're initially planning out what a telemedicine program might look like.
So Megan, stating the obvious, what was the big change that happened during COVID?
Complete opening up of the regulations and what was considered a billable event
So
before.
E&M, just office visit.
Correct. Compensation for that, where the patient sits, there wasn't the same level of scrutiny of are they in a rural health area? Are they in a hospital system? Um, it just generally increased the level of access patients had to their providers,
Right, right. By necessity, of course.
of course.
And folks, what we want to do, I think, in the next part of the podcast is hear how that's impacted our patients and providers. Um, because what we've heard in the legal department is how fantastic it's been. Of course, we've also heard, our loyal listeners will know, we had the DOJ on, and they were very focused on COVID abuses. They worry if you open the door a little bit that you get a lot of fraud, waste, and abuse that comes in, and they're very focused on that. And so, but I think it's important that we just need to look into a little bit, how did that go and what impact did it have? Because the other thing I think we should say is we don't know yet, after COVID, whether these changes are going to be made permanent. We just haven't received any guidance on that.
We have some idea of sort of where CMS is heading, but largely right, correct. Don't know where we're going to go, how this is going to look. And to your point, to the enforcement of these abuses are really egregious. And I think by and large, providers are trying to just do right by their patients, but there's certainly space to make sure that we eliminate fraud, waste, and abuse within the healthcare system.
We did a podcast recently, and I said, this is why we can't have nice things, right? These abusers come in, they jeopardize the Medicare trust. And then because of that, we have all these tight rules on people that are just trying to get healthcare to people during a, pandemic or even after, that have a hard time getting into the office. The ones that need it the most, frankly, are the people that are going to have a hard time coming in. So, Megan, thank you so much for this overview and just all of the work that you've done at Village here to keep us up to date on the COVID telemedicine rules. And I think we're going to turn now to hearing from some of our folks in the field about the impact of these changes.
Enough of the legal mumbo jumbo. We'd love to get a physician's perspective on the impact of COVID-19 and telemedicine. I'd like to welcome Dr. Wetherell, who is one of our amazing physicians in Arizona. Dr. Wetherell, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So in your experience, what have been some of the advantages that you've noticed while doing telemedicine?
So there have been literally so many advantages to having the option now to be able to deliver care in multiple ways. So while COVID fast-tracked telemedicine and has been terribly distressing overall, it's been beneficial in the sense that it's allowed us to offer the option of delivering care in multiple ways. So not only can we see patients in the clinic, we can now say, hey, would you like the option of the flexibility of having care delivered while you're sitting in your own home? So the flexibility here is so essential. Patients are very busy. They have multiple stressors in their life, whether or not they have a child at home, whether or not they have a parent that they're caring for, maybe they don't have transportation, maybe their car broke down. So they now have the option of saying, I can't get to you, and I would like to have the option of having care delivered to me the way I choose to have it delivered. So the power of choice is a powerful thing.
Well,
And
and it sounds like too, it keeps the patient in the driver's seat. The patient can, let you know when they are experiencing barriers to accessing care. Especially, I would imagine there are instances where there are, serious results that you're trying to deliver to them, or sensitive results, and a phone call just isn't going to do, or an Athena message isn't going to work out. So, what has been the feedback that you've received, or maybe you've heard from patients about their experience in using telemedicine?
so the feedback has been incredible because not only does it allow the flexibility to see the patient when where they want to be seen at a time that might be more convenient for them, but it allows us to offer appointments to those that are homebound, to those that are sick, and to those that have really urgent, sensitive test results that perhaps they otherwise couldn't get to us in that same day. But if we could say to them, we have the option of doing a telemedicine visit, would you like that option? Number one, we've just given them the power of choice. And when you allow somebody to have that power, it's very comforting and it eases anxiety. So not only can we now get them in when maybe we couldn't, we can get them in more quickly. We can still have the experience where we're looking at each other, and that's important because some of these results, they're very sensitive and we need to have that human connection. You don't have to be sitting in the same room to have a connection with the patient that you have known for years, or even for a short period of time. We can see each other. We can talk through whatever that result is. Maybe it's an abnormal mammogram. Maybe it's a chest CT with a lung nodule. There are many situations where we just need to have that appointment done in a more urgent fashion because we need to arrange next steps, and we don't want to deliver certain medical results on a telephone call by a medical assistant. There are certain results that have to come from the provider. So flexibility, promptly getting results to patients, meeting them where they are and giving them the choice, it's just changed the way we're able to deliver care.
And just thinking too, as a patient myself, the agony or the message, that's sitting in your inbox, like, we need to have a conversation in person. And you're like, oh my goodness, I've got work, I've got kids, I've got, all of these other responsibilities. How am I going to schedule, time to meet with my provider in person while juggling all of these other things? To your point, Dr. Wetherell, it is just fantastic that patients are able to access their providers, especially in their time of need, in order to receive either that comfort or at least that information to empower them to make their next choice or next decision, and keeps the patient, in the driver's seat of their care.
Absolutely. And it's not only comforting for the patient, it's also comforting for the provider. We're invested in the relationships we have with our patients. And, take, for example, the doc that's in clinic all day. Now it's 4 o'clock, and now we're just getting to our inbox. And now we see that urgent result. And we know we need to get the result to that patient. We know that patient is waiting for that breast biopsy result that happened 2 days ago. And every hour that's passing is an hour that patient is waiting, and we know that, and we feel that stress that patient feels. And so now we can go run to our assistant and say, can you get this patient in right now? And that's also important because there are next steps that need to be taken many times, and we need to first deliver the results so now we can move forward with those next steps. So every passing moment is is valuable, and it's really anxiety provoking for the patient, and it's stressful for the provider who knows that patient is waiting. So it's just another beautiful option and another way to deliver care the right way, which is allowing patients the choice to have the care delivered the way they want it delivered. That patient may choose to come into the office the following day, and that's okay, but we've given them the power to decide how they want that result delivered.
Mhm. Yeah, no, that's a fantastic point. And I mean, I'm not naive enough to think that, telemedicine in its current state is perfect, or, that there's no way in which it can improve. In your experience hearing from patients, what are some recommendations or perhaps issues or struggles that still continue to persist related to telemedicine that should be on either regulators' roadmap or even just from a process perspective that you would recommend working through to provide a better experience for both patient and physician?
So there have been lots of struggles, and let's face it, not everybody is technologically savvy. Our younger patients have been a little more adaptable, I'll say, because they know technology. They've got smartphones. They're not as anxious about the idea of having care delivered a different way. As a matter of fact, they fully embraced it, love it, and now we're having to convince them to come into the clinic. So we have our younger patients it's been very, very easy. And then we have our older patients that at first it was a big struggle. And all across America, kids were going to their parents' houses, sitting down with them and helping them get online. And so it's been a fun process actually to see, because we've seen those adult children coaching their parents through. And at the beginning, when they had a hard time getting on and had to always have their adult child with them to coach them through it, now a year later, they're doing it on their own. And it's funny, they actually will have the MAs cheering them on like, you did it. And there's applause and everybody's smiling and happy. And I'm not kidding. It's this experience where they feel like they accomplished something that they thought that they couldn't. And we found that coaching the patient ahead of time. So let's say my medical assistant calls Mrs. Smith and says, okay, we're going to do this appointment, and this is how we're going to do it, and this is what you're going to expect. And they actually just walk them through the steps, which are very few and very simple. I've actually overheard the conversation on numerous occasions, and you can actually hear the patient realizing, oh, it's really going to be very easy. So coaching the patient on exactly what's going to happen. You're going to get a text, and this is what you click on, and this is what you're going to see, and this is what you enter. And then you're going to be in the waiting room. When you coach them through the very few steps and tell them what to expect, it actually runs fairly smoothly. Now, every now and then there's something that's down or a system lag. And sometimes we will start on the video and something will happen, and we'll have to give them a call to conclude a session. So nothing's perfect in life, but we've actually found that the pre-visit coaching by the medical assistant, telling the patient exactly what to expect, has really smoothed out the process.
Well, that's such a fantastic solution, and it is probably very rewarding for the patient when they come in. They've got this sense of accomplishment, and then the provider, that's one less thing that you've got to worry about. And especially if you're delivering sensitive results, one less thing stressor on both sides of the communication that they have to work through. And I think to highlight some of our patients in more rural areas, I mean, access to just that, the broadband and being able to have that live audio visual communication could be a struggle, which is quite frankly out of their control. So I think that's something to, if I could just add in for regulators to consider when it comes to, reimbursement, because these may be real challenges that we can do our best to navigate. And you gave a great example of like having that pre-call, but at the same time, we can't create, wireless services where none exist. So that's an interesting a piece to consider.
Exactly. And if you think about it, as we move forward in time here, more and more care is going to be delivered in the home. And this is just another way for that to occur. And to your point, these rural areas, I mean, folks are far away. They cannot easily get to their provider, but you can easily get to that smart device if you have the ability and connect with your provider. So the flexibility and the patient choice here, it's essential to how we deliver care moving forward.
Now, as we think optimistically to a post-COVID world, how would you like to see telemedicine work, operate?
So I certainly hope that regulators don't take the ability that we have currently to provide this service to our patients. I would hope that as we move forward, we have this continued flexibility to allow our patients to make the choice. Do you want to be in person, or do you want the next appointment to be telemedicine? And in a perfect world right now, for example, when my patient leaves, when we're deciding on the next appointment, we'll sit and talk. Okay, well, the next appointment, it could be a telemedicine or an in-person. What would you choose? Again, very powerful when you let the patient be in control. There's a lot of patients have anxiety when they don't feel in control. So this is a very important aspect of delivering care, is letting the patient feel in control in some way. So a perfect world, I would like patients to be able to have the continued option in the office or telemedicine.
Yeah, and especially within healthcare, I mean, there's so much that as a patient and as a provider you can work to try to, like, I'm using air quotes, control or mitigate, but then there's also so many aspects of health that truly are just, genetics or environmentally caused conditions that are out of a person's control. So to the extent, to your point, Dr. Wetherell, that we can continue to empower both our patients and providers to have that collaborative communication, I think everyone's better off.
Agreed, completely.
Well, Dr. Wetherell, I want to thank you so very much for your insights and perspectives on telemedicine, and we hope to have you back soon.
Thanks.
Hi, so we have another interview for you all. So we have Stacy Gabrysz, who's working in our Village Medical New Jersey clinic. She's a regional practice administrator. Thank you so much for joining us today, Stacy.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So we just have a couple quick questions to ask your experience about telemedicine. So let's just start off. What are some advantages that you've noticed while doing telemedicine?
Okay, so some advantages that I've noticed doing telemedicine is that there's two things actually. I noticed that we're able to see a couple extra patients. It doesn't take as much time as an in-person visit. And secondly, I noticed that it is giving the staff a little time back for any admin work that they need to get done.
Is this because triage is faster, or is there like a specific reason why it's just taking less time?
Sure. So we're not doing vital signs, so that adds a few more minutes to the triage process. However, we are asking the patient if they have the accessibility to triage themselves and get their vitals from their home.
So what has been the general patient experience for telemedicine? Do they like it? Do they dislike it?
So I've gotten all mostly positive feedback on telemed. It's very convenient to see the doctor from home, so they like that. It's convenient not to have to get in your car and go. It's convenient not to have to get up and get dressed. The patients do seem to like it. Sometimes there's a little bit of a wait but for the most part, they would be waiting if they came in the office as well. So it's not really a problem that I've been hearing.
Do you think that a lot of the patients are going to want to stick with telemedicine, or are they eager to get back, or is it sort of a mix of both?
So I think that it's a mix of both. I think some patients are getting super comfortable with the telemedicine. And I think that, a mix of patients are eager to come back and get out of the house and see people and talk to people and see their provider face to face.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like in general positive experiences, but have you seen any sort of struggles or issues with doing telemedicine? Is there anything that's, been problematic?
So the only struggles that I've seen is, sometimes there's some sort of internet issues, whether it's on our end or the patient's end. So if there is some sort of internet issue and we just can't get the patient on, we will move to an audio call. And also, for the beginning, struggle was that we had gone to a few different platforms for telemed, and now Village has their own platform on DocOS, and that has been going fantastic.
Oh, that's great to hear. We always love to hear that. The last question that we have is, do you think telemedicine should continue post COVID?
So I personally don't think that COVID is going to go anywhere anytime soon, but I do agree that telehealth should stick around for certain patients, the elderly patients, patients who are just coming out of the hospital, some patients that are immunocompromised. But for the most part, I do think that patients that are just coming for their everyday well should be coming back to the office.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining and talking about your experience. We really appreciate, all that you do. We hope that you'll come back sometime.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And thanks for having me. It was wonderful.
Thank you to our sponsor, VillageMD. We hope you will join us for future concise compliance conversations.